On the morning of March 8th, in the Sahel town of Dori, something simple but powerful took place. A group of rural women gathered around a newly prepared farming site. There were no long speeches about theories or international conferences. Instead, they were handed access to land, about 2 hectares of farmland, which is roughly 5 acres. For many of these women, it was the first time they had been given the right to cultivate a space that could truly belong to their work and their future. For decades across many parts of Africa, women have worked tirelessly in agriculture without having control over land. They planted crops, harvested food, and fed their families. Yet the land itself often remained under the authority of others. Policies and slogans about women's empowerment were frequently repeated in meetings and development programs. But for many rural women, daily life remained the same. In Dori, however, a different approach began to take shape. The government of Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traore, chose to demonstrate a simple principle. If women are to be empowered, they must be given the means to produce, to earn, and to sustain their families. Land, seeds, water, and knowledge are not symbolic gestures. They are tools of dignity. This initiative raises an important question. Can something as straightforward as giving women a few hectares of land transform not only their lives, but also the stability and resilience of an entire community? For generations in Burkina Faso, rural women have been the quiet backbone of agriculture. At sunrise, they walk to the fields, often carrying tools, seeds, and sometimes even their youngest children on their backs. They plant maize, beans, tomatoes, and vegetables that will later feed their families and supply the markets of nearby towns. Yet despite their constant labor, many of these women have historically had little control over the land they cultivate. In many rural communities, land ownership has traditionally been held by men or by extended family structures. Women work the soil, but the decisions about land use, harvest, and income were often made by others. This situation created a difficult cycle. A woman could work tirelessly during the farming season and still struggle to pay school fees for her children or secure enough food during the dry months. The challenges did not end there. Many women farmers also faced a lack of farming tools, limited access to fertilizers, and little opportunity to learn improved agricultural techniques. Without irrigation systems or reliable support, their harvests depended heavily on unpredictable rainfall. One poor season could mean months of hardship for an entire family. Because of these conditions, rural women were often described as the most hardworking yet least supported producers in the agricultural economy. Their contribution to food production was enormous, but their access to resources remained limited. Across many villages in Burkina Faso, the reality was clear. Women were feeding communities, but they rarely had the power to fully benefit from the land they cultivated. This is why the initiative introduced in Dori carries such significance. It begins to change a pattern that had existed for generations, by giving women not only responsibility for farming, but also the space and authority to build their own economic future. In the town of Dori, the initiative to support rural women took a very concrete form. Instead of promises or temporary aid programs, the authorities decided to create organized agricultural sites where women could cultivate their own land. One of these projects provided women with access to about 2 hectares of farmland, which is roughly 5 acres. For many families in the region, this represents a significant space capable of producing food throughout much of the year. This land is not simply an empty field. It is part of a structured agricultural perimeter designed to support small-scale farming. The women working there receive guidance from agricultural technicians who help them learn better planting methods, soil preparation techniques, and crop management. They also receive support such as fertilizers and training sessions that explain how to increase yields while protecting the soil. The crops grown on these fields are practical and adapted to the climate of the Sahel. Women cultivate maize, beans, tomatoes, onions, and various vegetables that can be sold in local markets. Some crops provide immediate food for the household, while others generate income that helps cover essential expenses. For many women, the opportunity to farm their own 2 hectares changes the entire structure of family life. Instead of relying only on seasonal work or small trading activities, they now have a stable, productive base. A harvest can mean money to pay school fees, buy medicine, or repair a home before the rainy season arrives. Equally important is the sense of ownership and responsibility that grows from working land that has been entrusted to them. The fields become a symbol of possibility. What began as a simple agricultural project gradually turns into a path toward independence and dignity for women who have long carried the weight of rural life. Once women gain access to land and the ability to cultivate it, the changes that follow are often immediate and visible. In communities like Dori, a small agricultural field can quickly transform daily life inside a household. When a woman harvests maize or vegetables from land she manages, the first benefit usually appears on the family table. Meals become more regular, and families rely less on uncertain purchases from distant markets. But the impact goes far beyond food. Income generated from selling surplus crops allows women to participate more actively in household decisions. Many mothers use their earnings to pay school fees for their children. Others invest in clothing, medicine, or small improvements to their homes. In this way, a harvest is not only a farming result, it becomes an investment in the future of the family. These agricultural spaces also strengthen cooperation among women. Instead of working in isolation, they organize themselves into groups that share knowledge, tools, and labor. When one field needs watering or harvesting, neighbors help each other. Over time, these small networks become informal support systems that help families survive difficult seasons. In regions of the Sahel, where insecurity and economic hardship have forced many people to leave their villages, such initiatives carry an even deeper meaning. When women have access to productive land, families are less likely to abandon their homes in search of uncertain opportunities elsewhere. Farming becomes a reason to remain, rebuild, and protect the stability of the community. What emerges from these fields is therefore more than food or income. It is confidence. Women who once worked quietly on land they did not control now see the results of their own decisions and labor. That confidence spreads through families and villages, gradually strengthening the social fabric of the entire region. Behind many of these initiatives stands the political vision promoted by Captain Ibrahim Traore. Since coming to power, he has repeatedly emphasized that national development in Burkina Faso must rely on the strength of its own people. In this vision, rural women are not seen as a vulnerable group that simply needs assistance. They are seen as producers, builders, and essential partners in the country's future. Traore has often insisted that empowerment must be measured by practical results. According to this perspective, real liberation for women does not come from speeches or symbolic declarations. It comes when women have access to land, resources, and the opportunity to generate their own income. The agricultural sites created in places such as Dori reflect this philosophy. By granting women about 2 hectares of farmland, roughly 5 acres, the state is offering a tool that can produce lasting change. This approach also connects with a broader national strategy focused on strengthening agriculture and reducing economic dependence. Burkina Faso, like many countries in the Sahel, faces challenges linked to climate, security, and limited economic infrastructure. Encouraging local food production therefore becomes both an economic and a strategic priority. Within this framework, Women farmers play a critical role. When women succeed in agriculture, entire families benefit. When families become more stable, communities gain resilience. From this point of view, empowering rural women is not only a social policy, it becomes part of a larger effort to rebuild the country from the ground up. For many supporters of this vision, the image of women cultivating their own fields symbolizes something deeper than a development project. It represents a belief that national progress must grow from the work and dignity of ordinary citizens. The policies introduced in Burkina Faso under Captain Ibrahim Traore have not escaped criticism from abroad. Some governments and international organizations in Western countries often focus on the political circumstances surrounding the current leadership, especially the fact that Traore came to power through a military transition. Reports and commentaries sometimes highlight concerns about democratic processes, human rights, or the ongoing security challenges facing the Sahel region. These criticisms form part of a broader international debate about governance and stability in West Africa. For many observers in Europe or North America, the political framework of a country is often evaluated through the lens of elections, institutions, and diplomatic alignment. From that perspective, Burkina Faso is frequently discussed in terms of political transition rather than social initiatives on the ground. Yet, for many people living in rural communities, the daily reality is measured in very different ways. In villages across the Sahel, the most pressing questions are often simple. Is there enough food for the family this season? Can parents afford to send their children to school? Will the next harvest bring income or hardship? Programs that provide land, training, and agricultural resources to women address these questions directly. A plot of land may appear modest on paper, but in practice it represents security, dignity, and opportunity. When a woman harvests crops from her own field, she gains the ability to support her family with her own work. For this reason, supporters of these initiatives argue that empowerment should not only be discussed in political forums, it should also be evaluated through the tangible improvements experienced by ordinary citizens. If a policy allows mothers to feed their children, educate them, and stabilize their communities, many people consider that result to be a meaningful form of progress. From this perspective, the agricultural projects in places like Dori illustrate an alternative approach to development. Instead of waiting for large international programs or external funding, change can begin with practical steps that give communities the tools to build their own future. The story unfolding in Dori carries a message that reaches far beyond a single town in northern Burkina Faso. What began as the allocation of farmland to rural women now reflects a larger question about how development can grow across Africa. 2 hectares of land, about 5 acres, may look small on a map, yet for the women who cultivate it, that space represents stability, opportunity, and dignity. Through their daily labor, these women show that empowerment is not an abstract slogan. It grows from harvests that feed families and from income that keeps children in school. Each season strengthens the link between work confidence and independence. The soil becomes more than farmland. It becomes a foundation for resilience inside families and across villages where women once worked without control over the land they farmed before. For Burkina Faso, projects like the one in Dori also express a national vision. The idea is simple. A country becomes stronger when its citizens can produce food, build livelihoods, and rely on their own effort. When rural women gain land tools and knowledge, they strengthen households, local markets, and community stability. In this way, agriculture becomes more than farming. It becomes part of rebuilding the nation from the ground up slowly. The experience of these farmers also carries a wider lesson for Africa. Development cannot rely only on speeches or distant programs. It must also begin in villages where people receive the tools to shape their own future. Land training and opportunity can open paths that restore dignity and hope. For many supporters, this vision connects with Pan-African ideals of cooperation, renewal, and confidence in Africa and in leaders like Ibrahim Traore.